Just like Michelangelo into the blue, on heavenly wings. Cargo hand bones don't take off, no smoke, no mirror, no strings. I can't take off these dark shades, I can only say how it's too beautiful. Our town on TV, our town, there's you and me. Upside down, hanging out of an airplane.
Welcome to Our Town, and I'm your host, Larry Frost. We have a very special show today. We're going to the Amesbury Police Department. Our guest host is Peter Hoyt. He'll be interviewing Lt Kevin Ouellet, Sergeant William Scholtz, and Dispatcher Candice. So let's get started.
Well, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood today, and we're here at the Amesbury Police Department. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce to our viewing audience our Police Lieutenant, Kevin Ouellet. Good afternoon, Kevin.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Amesbury Police Department.
Thank you so much. I'm curious, what can you show us today? What do you have on your agenda?
Well, first, when we go inside the door, I'd like to show you our communications center, how it looks today, and maybe a little history of what it was back quite a few years ago.
Tell me now, Kevin, am I correct that the structure behind us was constructed in 1929?
Yes, 1929 is when it was finished, yes.
And at that time we had our second district court as well as the Amesbury Police Department, but a lot of change since that time, am I correct?
There has been a lot of change. Along with the police department, we shared this space with the some offices with the town hall.
I see. Busy place. Well, Kevin, I think if you wouldn't mind, let's go on in and see what we can see at the dispatch center.
Well, let's make it happen.
Kevin, this is amazing. It's like stepping back into my past. You know, I think the last time I was on this side of the police station was probably when I was in elementary school myself and was on a field trip when we were visiting our different community agencies. And if I'm not mistaken, Kevin, we entered through the door just over here, and then there was a counter right here.
That's correct.
And I believe the district courthouse entrance was on the other side. Could you talk a little bit about the structural changes, although I think what's behind me was probably in place those many years ago?
It was a little bit different. I can only speak of from the time I started. So I remember the station back in the late 70s, early 80s. And this desk was pretty much a sergeant's desk. What you see right now is where the sergeant is sitting today, as he was back in the 70s, the shift supervisor. Back then it was a captain. And they would dispatch right from this desk here. Since 2006, 2007, we built on the communications center, which you see behind us. So the door you were speaking of earlier is that you would come into that door, there would be a counter in front of you, you would speak to the desk sergeant or the desk officer that was sitting there, and he would take your complaint, dispatch to radio communications right from where he was sitting, and the phones would be right beside him also.
Now, there's not a whole lot of activity on this side right now, so I'm correct in assuming that this is home to the shift supervisor. And I heard through the grapevine that today's shift supervisor is Sergeant Scholtz. Is that correct?
That's correct. Sergeant Scholtz is working today. He stepped away from the desk to take care of some police business.
And so then, Kevin, again, I want to make sure I'm clear on this. The secondary door over here is never used for entrance in 2012. It's now simply a means of exit if the officers need to leave the building. The main door is the door over behind us?
That's correct. That has changed since 2006, 2007, since they did their construction and the court has moved out.
Very good. Well, something that I know I'm very curious about, and I'm sure that our viewing audience will be curious as well. Clearly, there has to be someone here at all times, and I understand that today's shift supervisor is Sergeant Scholtz. So I wondered if you'd like to introduce Sergeant Scholtz to our audience and talk a bit about his responsibilities and the kinds of activities that consume his day as shift supervisor.
Yes, Sergeant Scholtz, please come step on over.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you, sir.
Sergeant Scholtz is our shift supervisor during the day shift. He works at 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And I'll let him speak to what his duties are, what it entails, and some of his responsibilities.
Sounds good. Bill, what does your day look like? Not that any 2 days are the same, but what's a typical day in the life of a shift supervisor?
Most of the time we start out at 7. Make sure that the shift is ready to go out at 7 o'clock, take on their duties. We'll do a brief roll call, make sure that any information that needs to be passed is passed on to the oncoming shift. From that point, the officers go out, start taking care of their duties. I'll come in here, start working on a ton of admin stuff, making sure that dispatch is all set. And then throughout the day, we'll have shifts that need to be filled, details that need to be filled. A lot of that falls on me. Some of the calls that the officers go on get a little more in depth than others. So a lot of times they'll look for guidance from me in my position to kind of guide them where they need to go and make sure that we're all on the same page and getting everything done correctly.
I see now. 2 questions come to mind. Well, 3 actually. I'm noticing right behind you and in front of your desk here, there's a monitor that shows 3 different scenarios, and I think they're all on site. Am I correct?
Correct.
And I'm also wondering, I notice you have 1 dispatcher today, and is that typically the case? We have 1 dispatcher in place?
That's correct. Typically we go with 1 dispatcher. If we have a major event, major storm coming up, major fire, some type of a big event, we'll call in a 2nd dispatcher. We'll fill the 2nd spot within dispatch. Doesn't happen a lot. Every once in a while we have to do it. But the screen that you see above me is the same screen that the dispatch sees and kind of gives us just a quick overview of what's going on throughout the station, both the rear of the station, front of the building, garage area, and in our entryway. So it kind of gives us an idea where everybody is. If anybody is in those places that aren't supposed to be there, we can address it. We have had some incidents in the past where people have got into places they shouldn't have been, and we never had the opportunity to see it. Now we do.
That's a good thing. The larger question that struck me as I was envisioning your days here at the desk, in the event of a major crisis, locally or in our area, is it ever your responsibility to respond, or is your sole responsibility the days that you are assigned as shift supervisor to remain at this desk at all times?
No, there'll be instances when I have to go out and I'm actually required to go out on certain calls. Doesn't happen a lot, but like I said initially, a lot of my stuff is admin. But there are those occasions when I do have to go out, and I do go out.
Great. I'm also noticing as we look into this room where the dispatcher is seated, not only is there a mirror image of this monitor that you have in front of your desk, I'm noticing a larger monitor to the right, which seems to be a map of the town, if I'm not mistaken. Could you talk a bit about the purpose of that monitor?
That's our AVL, automatic vehicle locator, and I can look at that, or dispatch can look at that, see where our cruisers are, should they get a call, be able to dispatch the closest officer to that call. That way we kind of eliminate any, guys crossing paths and coming from the far side of town when they don't need to do that. We have an officer that's already right there. And if one of my officers should get into trouble, I can look up there, see where he is or see where she is, pinpoint it, and start sending secondary cruisers out there and making sure that officer's all set.
So really the response is virtually immediate.
Yes.
That's terrific. Now I'm curious too, as we're here talking about your responsibilities as a shift supervisor, communication is critical, obviously, to the operations of a successful and efficient police department. I would imagine you're almost in constant contact with either Lieutenant Ouellet or our Chief Gagnon. Is that correct?
Most of my interaction, if there's something going on that is starting to get involved, my first responsibility is to the lieutenant, and then from here it's up to him to disseminate it up above. But my first issue is with him. If I have something going on, my immediate response is to him and make sure he knows what's going on.
Now, a question that may seem silly, but for the layperson like myself, is the shift supervisor's role something that's a rollover from officer to officer and you simply roll in and out, or is it specifically something that just a few officers are trained to serve as a shift supervisor? Does that question make sense?
It does make sense. And our shift supervisors are sergeants, and it is a training is required for that position. You just can't just step in to do it. There's days that we'll have an OIC, an officer in charge, because the supervisor is none available. So we'll bring in an OIC, an officer in charge. But a lot of times all those legal questions, those questions that come into mind, they'll get deferred to another sergeant that's coming on, or even to myself. I'll get a phone call at home. We have a situation, we need your advice on it. And so I would get a lot more phone calls when there's not a sergeant on duty.
Now, in addition to Sergeant Scholtz, how many sergeants do we have, Kevin? Who might they be?
We have 6 sergeants. We have Sergeant Chatigny, who was also the day supervisor on the other line. Mm-hmm. On the evening shifts, the 5 o'clock shift, we have Sergeant Donovan. From the other evening shift is Sergeant Chaput. On the late night shifts, we have Sergeant Poulin, and we have Sergeant Bailey.
So hop in place. I'm wondering if we might move into this facility, if it's appropriate, so that we can get a closer look at the work of a dispatcher.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Sure. Well, Officer Scholtz, we've moved from your desk into the communications center, and so I really feel privileged to be standing here today with you and with our very kind dispatcher. A question I have to ask you at the outset. I can't help but think about the old days, the good old days. In the good old days, what did the Amesbury Police Department do when they didn't have this incredible technological wonder, this widescreen that told you in a moment where an officer was and if that officer was in distress?
In the old days, we would put it out to the cars and just call the first, kind of went into a rotation where the lowest number cruiser got the first call, and so on and so on. And then, because we never worked in sectors, and typically what a sector would do is an officer would be responsible for a certain sector of town. We never worked in that capacity, so the cars were free roaming. They could be anywhere in town, and 16 plus square miles. Could be anywhere within that 16 miles, and we never knew where they were. So we would just put it out to whichever car was next. Now, that officer could be completely on the other side of town. Occasionally, or most of the time, the officers would step up if there was someone closer and say, I'm closer, I can take that call. Didn't always happen. If you were looking someone and someone was tired, looking for someone or something, and someone was tired, they wouldn't always answer up. So now this helps us tremendously in knowing where our officers are, what they're doing for the most part, and how long they've been there. So this really, really saves a lot of time on our part.
Well, again, as a layperson, I can't help but think about that very thing. Time is critical.
Sure.
Depending on the situation to which you are responding. So I can only imagine the positive changes that have been realized as a result of this wonderful addition to our station. This young lady has been very, very patient, and she's been incredibly busy. The short time that I've been in this building, she's been responding to calls at every turn. Could you introduce our dispatcher to us and then possibly talk about a lot of the equipment we see around us, the equipment that she has been working with so professionally?
This is Candice Tolios. She's assigned to my shift all 4 days. She works with me throughout the shift. Actually, she comes on an hour before me and leaves an hour later than I do. But she's here for the entire time that I am. We are very busy here. This is a lull. This is unusual for us to not have the phones ringing right now. Usually, I'll be sitting at my desk, I'll have a question to ask her, and I can't even get the words out of my mouth and the phone's ringing, or the cruisers are calling in, or something's happening. This is an oddity right now. But it is very busy here. She has a ton of stuff that she has to work with. We have 911, we have our in-house computer, we have all our radio systems are here on this, the ones with the red blocks, that's all of our radios. Over to the left here is a state computer, all the printers to go along with it. Again, the AVL, the monitors throughout the station. This is 4 of 12. We actually have 12 cameras within the station.
Incredible.
And I can control that, or Candice can control that from a box behind Larry over here, and we can control all of that. We have recordings for the cell block. We can have talk back to the cell block, so if we have someone out there, we can talk with them. This system that you see over here is identical, for the most part, to what you have over here. So if something happens here, or we have a major event, we can put that second dispatch or communications officer in over here and pick that up.
I see. Candice, clearly you didn't simply walk in off the street and say, hey, I'm looking for a job, and sit down at this desk. Could you talk just briefly about the training that was required of you before you could come in to do this important work?
They put me through a lot of training. I actually went to a dispatcher's academy that lasted several months. I received most of my certifications there, as well as having to sit in dispatch for another couple months on top of that to make sure that I was ready to be on my own. The certifications that we have are... how many do we have? We have too many to count. We have a lot. I mean, we have to have certifications for our CGIS. We have to have certifications for 911, our EMD, first responder. We have quite a bit, and it takes a long time to get those certifications.
Well, congratulations for receiving them. And I would imagine that once you receive them, you don't simply rest on your laurels. As in most fields, it's constant professional development, education, recertification. What are the expectations of you and any other dispatcher in terms of your ongoing professional development?
We have quite a bit of ongoing training. We're actually doing some training right now between cross-training with the fire department and the fire department coming over here to cross-train. We do our certifications every time before they expire. We have to renew our classes and renew our certifications and go through all of that, whether it be in training, in classroom or online. They all get recertified. So.
Incredible. And I just have to ask you one more question, if I might.
Excuse me. Amesbury, please.
So you certainly are a busy young woman, but I have to ask you one more question. I noticed that recently Amesbury added its first female officer, an Officer Tironi. And as you think about your life and what the next chapter of your life might hold, do you have any ambitions toward becoming a full-time officer?
I see what they do day in and day out, and I do not see myself doing that. They have a very hard, tough job to do, and I have all the respect in the world for them, but I don't think I'll be a police officer.
Well, we have a lot of respect for you, and we certainly appreciate the work that you do, and not just anybody could be a dispatcher and respond the way that you respond. So thank you very much for your time, and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed the show. I want to thank Peter Hoyt, Lt Kevin Ouellet, Sergeant William Scholtz, and Dispatcher Candice. Work hard, stay healthy, and please take time to care for someone. From our town, bye-bye.
Just like Michelangelo into the blue, on heavenly wings. Cargo ham bones don't take off, no smoke, no mirror, no strings. I can't take off these dark shades, I can only say how it's too beautiful. Our town on TV, our town, there's you and me. Upside down, hanging out of an airplane.